Hey Hornets, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing part 4 of lesson 16. Part 4 begins on page 164 in your Ready workbook. So if you don't have your Ready workbook out, go ahead and take a moment. Make sure you have out your Ready workbook, a pen or a pencil, and a yellow highlighter. Okay, so when you have all that out, we are ready to begin. So, the first thing we are going to do is rewrite the title of our lesson at the top of the page. And you've noticed I have it in red, so that means you also need to write it in your Ready workbook. Don't forget, anything that I'm putting up on the screen you also need to put in your Ready workbook, so make sure you copy this down. And the title of our lesson is Analyzing Point of View. And out beside it, I have POV written, and POV stands for Point of View. Okay, so when we are thinking about point of view, we have to think about perspectives. And we have three different types of perspectives that we look at. We look at first person, second person, and third person. First person perspective uses the words I, me, my, me, we. And it is usually the character who is the one telling the story. That's how you know it's first person perspective. Second person is a little bit different, right? So, second person typically uses the word you, and the author is the one doing the talking. That's how you know it's second person. Typically, second person can be found in letters and directions, and that's how you know it's second person. Third person uses the words he, she, it, they, them, himself, herself, themselves, all those pronouns. Those are our third person pronouns. And typically in third person, you have a narrator who is telling the story, and that narrator is not a character in the story. They're pretty much just an invisible person who is telling you the story, telling you everything that's happening. So, those are our three perspectives. Don't forget that you have notes on those in your source book. So, when you are preparing for our quiz tomorrow, make sure that you look over those notes. All right, so before we begin, let's talk about the purpose of the text we're going to be looking at today. So, when reading, we have three purposes for reading. We read to be persuaded, informed, or entertained. And when an author is writing, they are either writing to persuade the reader, inform their reader, or to entertain their reader. Anything that is fiction, 99.9% of the time, it is to entertain the reader. So, the text that we're looking at today, The Stingy Artist, is fiction. So that means the purpose of it is to entertain. So I have entertain highlighted in yellow. So if you have out your yellow highlighter, go ahead and highlight entertain in yellow because that is the purpose of the text we're going to be looking at today. So, when we're thinking about point of view and perspective, we also have to make sure we think about tone. We can have three different types of tone. We have positive, negative, and neutral. And you've noticed probably out beside positive, we have a plus sign, out beside negative, we have a minus sign, and then we have a zero out beside neutral, right? So, these are our three types of tone. After you determine tone, you kind of have to think of feeling words that go along with the tone, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. So, for example, if you determine that the tone of a text is negative, you kind of need to think of some negative feeling words that back it up. So maybe like gloomy or grim or glum, maybe depressed. It just kind of depends, but you need those feeling words to back up your tone as well. So, tone and mood, pretty similar, right? So, we can have positive mood, and I have a little smiley face emoji to represent that. We have negative moods, I have my crying emoji, and we have neutral, and I have just the word meh to represent our neutral mood. So, tone and mood are actually congruent. We've been talking about this throughout the course of lesson 16 so far, so don't forget tone and mood are congruent. We're bringing a little math into ELA. Congruent means that they are the same but slightly different, right? So tone is the author's word choice and how it affects the characters. Mood is how you, the reader, feel when you are reading a text. So think tone is the author's word choice, mood is how you feel when you're reading it. So keep that in mind. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is look at our directions. So our directions say the following is a retelling of an ancient Zen tale called a koan, however you say that, which is meant to teach a moral or a lesson. We have to read the tale and use the study buddy and the close reading to guide your reading. All right, so you may be thinking a cone or koan, however you say it. You may be wondering what that is, right? So our directions tell us that it is an ancient Zen tale. So when you think about Zen, right, you kind of maybe think about meditation, being relaxed. We'll see if that kind of plays in here, right? But we know a koan is an ancient Zen tale. And the purpose of it is to teach a moral or a lesson, right? So there's always going to be a moral to a story, to this kind of story that always has a lesson to teach. That's the purpose of it, is to teach a lesson, right? So it's also to entertain, but you're going to learn a lesson while you get entertained. Okay, so before we read, we have to pay attention to the genre. When the text tells you what the genre is, you need to make sure you look at that. So the genre for our Zen tale, The Stingy Artist, is an allegory, and we actually took some source book notes on allegory the other day. So we already know that allegories have two layers of meaning. The first layer, very, very simple surface level. It's just a simple story, right? Um, but there's also a deeper abstract meaning, and that's the second layer. So the first layer, very simple, just our simple story. The second layer has a deeper, more abstract meaning. And when you hear the word abstract, I want you to think about something that it's not surface level. It's a little bit harder to understand. You kind of have to dig to really figure out that underlying meaning. So, in an allegory, you have characters, setting, conflict, theme, and all of those work together to help you develop and figure out that deeper, more abstract meaning. Okay, so our directions have also told us. Actually, let me pause. Let's look at the title of the story next. Sorry, guys, getting a little ahead of myself. Oh, nope, we're gonna look at the study buddy. Sorry, getting a little ahead. So, our directions tell us that we need to look at the study buddy and our close reading to guide us as we're reading. So the first thing we need to look at is the study buddy. Got to look at that first, because the study buddy is going to give us some hints and tell us what we need to look for as we read the story. So, our study buddy says authors often reveal their characters' thoughts and feelings through dialogue. And as I read, I'll pay close attention to what the characters say. So, we know that dialogue is literally the characters talking. You can know part of the text is dialogue because it has quotation marks around it. That helps you recognize dialogue. So as we read, or as you read, you're going to look for dialogue. So you're going to look at the stuff that has quotation marks around it. And you're going to pay attention to what those characters are saying, because what they're going to say is very important. If it wasn't important, the study buddy would not tell us that. So we have to make sure that we pay attention to that as we read. Okay, so now we've talked about our genre, we've looked at our study buddy. So the next thing we need to do is box in our title. So we always box in our title because we need to pay attention to it. And the title of this story is The Stingy Artist. And we know it's retold by Keisha Walker. So we look at the title because it could potentially help us figure out something about the text. And we can also figure out our word choice and whether or not it has positive or negative connotation, right? So the stingy artist. Let's look at the word stingy. I have it circled in our title. So, do you know what stingy means? If not, I'm about to tell you. Stingy means selfish or greedy. And the word stingy kind of has some negative connotation. If someone says you're stingy, they probably do not mean it in a positive way. They mean you're selfish, you're greedy, maybe you kind of hoard your money, you don't like to share it. So we know based on our title, we're going to be dealing with a stingy artist. And we all know what an artist is, right? So we know our story is probably going to have something to do with an artist who's stingy, right? Maybe he doesn't want to share his money, maybe he's greedy. Whatever the case, we will see. So, our paragraphs are already numbered for us, so we don't have to do that. But I do want us to pay close attention to this first section of our text. So, this first section is actually not really part of the story. It's just giving us a little bit of extra information to help us as we get ready to read. And our little extra section up here says this is a tale of Jeshin, a Tibetan monk who became a famous artist. Recognized for his amazing talent, Justin would always demand payment in advance before ever picking up a paintbrush. So that kind of gives us a good bit more information, right, about what we're going to read. So what I'm going to do next is kind of turn you loose and let you read The Stingy Artist for yourself. So make sure as you read that you pay close attention to the dialogue and what the characters are saying to one another. That's what our study buddy told us to do, so we've got to do it. So go ahead and start reading The Stingy Artist on your own first, and then we will come back and do our close reading. So go ahead, pause the video, read The Stingy Artist, and then come back when you're finished. Okay, guys, so I'm assuming you have read The Stingy Artist on your own once, and now you are ready to move on to the close reading section. So I'm going to go ahead, get us to our next slide so we can get ready for our close reading. So we have two close reading boxes to look at. This is our first one. So we have to think, how does Sakura feel about Jeshin? We have to underline any evidence in the text that explains her point of view. So as you read a second time, you are going to try to think about how Sakura feels about the artist Jeshin, right? So does she like him? Does she not like him? You tell me. You have to underline evidence in the text that explains her point of view. And when I say her point of view, I mean evidence that tells us how she feels about him. All right, so what I want you to do next is go ahead and reread The Stingy Artist a second time, but this time you have to underline details about how Sakura feels about Jeshin. So go ahead and do that for me, and when you have finished, come back and we will go over it together. All right, guys, so I'm assuming that you're back and that you have reread The Stingy Artist for a second time, and now you are ready to look at the evidence that you found in the text that explains Sakura's point of view about Jeshin. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. The first piece of evidence that I underlined was actually on the previous slide, so I'm going to take us back to paragraph 3. The first thing that I underlined was that it is shameful to speak of money so early in the discussion, right? So Sakura is a noble woman, right? And she wants Jessin to pay she wants him to paint a painting of her prize dogs, right? And we know that Jessin always demands payment in advance, right? Our information at the beginning of the text told us that. But whenever he asks how much she's going to pay, she tells him it's shameful to talk about money so early in the discussion, right? So this kind of tells us, maybe she thinks he's a little shameful to be talking about money so early on, and she doesn't really like that. So the second thing I have underlined, let me get us back to where we were, is in paragraph 5. It says Sakura sneered at the artist. When you sneer at someone, you don't do it because you like them. Let me just say that. When you sneer at someone, it's kinda like you are turning your nose up at them, like, maybe you think you're a little bit better than they are, or maybe they're they're doing something that you don't like, you kinda make an ugly face at them. So that's what Sakura is doing at Jeshin right now, right? So she doesn't wanna name a price, he wants her to, so she sneers at him, but she finally gives in, right? So if she's sneering at him, that kinda probably tells us maybe she doesn't like him that much. So let's go ahead and move on to our next piece of evidence in paragraph number 6. And she says, but you taint its beauty with your stinginess and petty desire for money. So after he paints the painting of the dogs, he presents it to her, right? And she loves it. She says it's the grandest painting in her collection. But there's one thing wrong. Jeshin has tainted the beauty of the painting because he's being so stingy with the price for it, right? So she says his desire for money is petty. If someone is being petty, that means that it's kind of like they're refusing to get down on your level in a way, and she calls him stingy, right? And we've already talked about the word stingy. We know that it means that you're greedy and selfish. So she's calling him greedy and selfish, and that he has a petty desire for money, and that is tainting the beauty of the painting that he did, right? Okay, and then last but not least, we have one more piece of evidence also in paragraph 6. Sakura says, your outrageous greed means you will never paint anything of worth. So, this definitely tells us how she feels about him, right? So, she says he has outrageous greed. And because he's greedy, anything that he paints will be worthless because he is so stingy and so petty. And that's just awful in her eyes, right? So, this is some evidence that kind of explains how Sakura feels about Jeshin, right? All right, so now we are ready to move on to our next close reading box. So, this one says, what do the last two paragraphs reveal about Jeshin's motives? You have to star any details that help explain how his actions reflect his point of view. So, in our first close reading, we look for evidence that explains Sakura's point of view, right? So now we kind of have to look at some stuff about Jeshin's motives and look for details that explain how his actions reflect his point of view. So, what I want you to do is reread The Stingy Artist for a third time. I know, guys. Reading it this third time, though, is really going to help you get it. So, I want you to do it. And as you are reading, when you get to paragraph 7 and 8, I want you to look for details that help explain how Jeshin's actions reflect his point of view, right? So, how he looks at the situation. And when you find those details, I want you to put a star beside them. All right, so go ahead and get to reading. Don't forget, paragraph 7 and 8, that's where you're going to star the details, not before. So whenever you have finished starring your details, come back and we're going to go over it together. All right, guys, so I'm assuming that you are back because you have found some details that explain how Jeshin's actions reflect his point of view. So now let's start going over a few of those together. So the first thing I starred was the phrase or the sentence, a year's wages I will take if that's what you will pay. Okay, so he's pretty much saying if she wants to pay a year's wages, he'll take it, right? So this one kind of it explains that he's going to take what she will pay. So if she wants to offer up more money, he's for sure going to take it, right? But we know he has good intentions. So let's get to some of those good intentions that help us understand his point of view. So it also says in paragraph 7, that next sentence, it says that Jeshin bore the scorn. Now I put sorry. I put my star beside the word scorn. So if you are being scorned, in a way, it's like you are being punished. Imagine Jeshin sitting at a table full of all these rich people, and all of a sudden they're just looking at him, shaking their heads, frowning at him like he's the worst thing ever. So that is scorn, and he is taking the brunt of it, right? So they are scorning him for being what they think is stingy and petty and greedy. But we really know Jeshin's true intentions, right? These details in paragraph 8 are really going to help us understand his point of view and why he does what he does. So let's look at those. So, that second full sentence in paragraph 8. He used every bit of his earnings to fill a warehouse with grain. And I put my star beside a warehouse. So we know the earnings that he gets from his paintings, he's using them to fill up a warehouse with grain. Now we know that these noble people who he is painting for, they're pretty much rich, right? They can throw all these lavish parties and feasts in honor of dogs, and that kind of seems ridiculous, right? So in the meantime, Jeshen is trying to help the village who is suffering from a famine, and he's taking the money and he is filling up that warehouse with grain. So I put my star beside warehouse because this helps explain how his actions reflect his point of view. So he's filling up the warehouse with grain. So he is also repairing the roads to the national shrine. So this is something he is also doing. Not only is he filling the warehouses with grain, he's repairing their roads. So this village is in pretty rough shape right now. And Jeshen is doing everything he can with the money he is earning to help them out. So he is doing some good, right? He's also building them a temple, a new temple. So in this culture, temples are very, very sacred to people like Jeshen and people in these villages. So if their temple is in poor condition, that is kind of very disrespectful in these people's eyes. So, Jeshen is doing everything he can to make sure that these people have a temple that is in good shape. So he is building his people a new temple with the money he gets from painting. So I put my star beside temple because that is an important detail. So, when all that's accomplished, when all of that had been accomplished, he gave his paintings away for free. Let that sink in for a minute. After he had filled the warehouse with grain, repaired the roads, built the temple, only then did he give away his paintings for free, right? So even though he may have seemed like he was charging a ridiculous amount, he did it because he had good intentions of spending that money to be helpful. And after all of that had been done, after he had helped the village recover, he gave away his paintings away for free, right? So I put my star beside free because that reflects his point of view, right? So that helps show us his actions, and that reflects his point of view. And then I also put my star beside coin because he never asked for never again asking for a single coin. So he never asked for a single coin again after he had repaired the village and done all that he could with the money he had been giving for his paintings. He never asked for a coin again. He did everything for free. So, do you think if Sakura had known all that, do you think maybe she would have called him petty and stingy and greedy? It's a good question. I want to say maybe, probably not, right? So, Sakura has one way of looking at it, the situation that she's in. Jeshen has a total different viewpoint, right? So, Sakura does not know Jeshen's motives, right? And what he is doing with the money he earns from his paintings. Jeshen, on the other hand, knows exactly what he's doing with his money, right? He has a good use for it. He is using it to restore the village. Jeshen, and whenever that's done, Jeshen paints for free. He never asks for a single coin. But Sakura doesn't know that. And because she doesn't know that, she has a totally different way of looking at it, right? So it all depends on your point of view and how you look at the situation. All right, guys. So now that you have done your close reading, you've done your study buddy, you have thoroughly analyzed the text known as the Stingy Artist. So you're ready to move on to the next workbook page, the rest of part 4. So Miss Murray is going to be recording that part for you, and you are going to do great on it. I know you are. So, if you have any questions about this section of part 4, about the text, or how we analyzed it, how we underlined the details that we underlined, or the details that we starred, or anything else, be sure to let me know because I would be more than happy to help you. So, good luck on the rest of part 4. And don't forget to study for your quiz. All right, guys, I will see you later. Don't forget to email me if you have any questions.